Hello, welcome everyone. It's 3 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. This is Angela Brown, the project lead with the Youth Career Connect program. Thank you for joining us today for Sustainability Planning for the Future. I am now going to turn it over to Maisha, who's going to be our moderator today and start us off.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me and possibly almost see me. Hi, everyone. It's good to see everybody. I see we have about 26 people on. We just want to invite you and encourage you all to type as many questions as you have as we talk about sustainability. And as you well know who I am, I'm Maisha. Hi, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you guys this, hopefully over the summer. What we want to focus on is really start planning for the future. And you know that sustainability is one of our core elements. It's core element 5. If you look at all the list of all the wonderful things you do for this grant, you have core element 5 that talks about sustainability. And basically, it really talks about what are we going to do after the funds run out, after DOL is gone, there's no more money left in the pot. How do we sustain, how do we keep the energy, the activities, the program elements that you've been working so hard on, the partnerships, the opportunities for the young people, the externships going after this grant period is up. And we want to make sure that we start doing that now, thinking about it now that you guys have had a year of implementation, now a year of actual activities. We start the planning of that that sustainability process right now. We don't want to wait until a year out. We want this conversation, those partnership conversations to look 2 and 3 years into the future. So what we have, what we're going to be talking about is the 4 pillars of the sustainability plan, how to build support for your case when you're trying to build partnerships and continue partnerships, and also your next steps for sustainability. And the agenda, we have these 2 wonderful women who are going to talk to you guys about sustainability. I can't wait to learn more from them. But an overview, again, we're going to learn about building your case for support, building an effective plan that you can take with you, keep with you, edit as you need to, build upon it. Again, it's a living, breathing document, so you start your plan, but you don't end just one time with the plan. You keep it going until you're ready to actually implement the sustainability plan after the grant period's over. And planning to plan, right? It's a whole bunch of planning and talking and meeting, so on and so forth. So without further ado, I'm going to talk to Susan and Justine are online. So Susan and Justine, are you with me?
Yes.
Okay.
So
I'm passing the ball. Hi, Susan. I'm passing the ball to Susan. She's going to get started with this wonderful opportunity for us to learn about our sustainability plans, and I'll see you guys later. Take care.
Hi, everybody. This is Sue Hyatt, and we've got Justine Murray here on the line as well. We're both really excited to be here today to talk to you about what's one of our favorite topics, actually. A lot of times when you say the word sustainability, people react to it almost like they do evaluation or IRS audit. And I think lots of times sustainability seems like a really big, scary concept when oftentimes day to day you feel like you're running as fast as you can, doing the things that you need to do to make your program or project work really effectively. And sometimes it seems like there really isn't time to think about this, quote, extra thing. But hopefully with some of the information we're going to share with you today, you're going to be able to think about sustainability both sort of from the big picture framework piece and have a bit clearer understanding of the things you need to be thinking about. But part of what we really want to do as we walk through the various pillars is give you some really concrete ideas of how you can start taking this on sort of one bite at a time so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. And you can get started, as Maisha said, right away with thinking about what are you going to sustain and what's that going to look like after DOL funding is gone. So what I'd like to start with here is just to give you the definition that Justine and I work from when we're talking about sustainability. I think sometimes with some types of programs where there's only one main organization that got the grants, sometimes sustainability people end up thinking about it as it's sustaining an organization. And it really isn't that. And in your case, you've got lots of partners that you're working with on the Youth Career Connect program under your grant. So you all have a piece of it. And the real goal here for sustainability is how are you all going to be able to continue to meet the needs of the young people that you're serving with this program beyond the life of this Department of Labor grant or other grants you might have, or if there was continued funding available, it might be at a smaller level. So how do you keep the important things going in those kind of circumstances? One of the things that I think is a misconception that people have is that sustainability is the same thing as fundraising. And it's the same thing as, okay, we have $1 million from this source, that $1 million goes away, how do we find another $1 million exactly as it was? And so really sustainability and fundraising is a piece of sustainability, and we're going to walk through some of the other things that you need to think about, but it's not just fundraising, there's more to it. So what we're going to be walking you through today is a model that Justine and I have used a lot with different sorts of government-funded programs and nonprofit programs, and we call it the 4 pillars of sustainability. And we're going to go through each of these in more detail, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview so you kind of see where we're heading. So of course, in order to be sustainable, you have to have a program that's working well. It's got to be strong. You've got to be collecting data so that you know it's really working. And of course, it's difficult to be sustainable if you're not basing that on a program that's meaningful and actually moving the needle. But assuming that you have that, then the pillars of sustainability all build together. In some ways, it's like the 4 legs of a stool. You have to have some activities going on in all of these pillars in order to really be sustainable for the long haul. So what we're going to be talking about is internal support, resource development, partnership development, and marketing and outreach. And it's by efforts you do in all 4 of these that you actually are able to be sustainable. So Justine, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk through the myths of sustainability.
Great. Thanks, Sue. And thanks, everybody. It is great to meet you and to be on this webinar with you and to begin to look at this wonderful work that you're doing.
Oh, Justine, just a second.
Yeah.
I forgot one thing.
Yeah.
Angela, we were going to do a quick poll now just to see who is actually on this call, because a piece that we wanted to set up right from the beginning, and you should see the poll over on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you could just mark which type of organization you're with, that would be great.
So everybody should be able to see that on the side of their screen where it says polling. Just let us know who's on the call so our speakers can kind of get a gist of who's working with us and how to direct some of their comments and concerns and issues towards different folks on the call. So please fill that out when you get a chance.
Thanks. One of the things that we'll be talking about, and as I'm talking while you're clicking which button is you, is there's sustainability planning has the same components, but depending on what kind of an organization you are and what role you play in your local partnership, the sustainability plan specifics may look different. So we wanted to just get a sense of what's the mix of folks here on the call with us today. And we'll give you another couple of seconds to click one of those, and then we'll let Angela put up the results so we can all see that. Angela, does it look like most people have answered it?
Yes, it has. So just a couple seconds here to show the results, and we'll open those up for you.
Great.
Looks like we had about 21 people respond.
Super. Yeah, we have a good turnout today, so that's great.
Yeah, it's lovely to see so many.
Right,
many people
and it's
on the
such
call.
an important topic.
So I'm not sure if I'm able to open it up, but it looks like we have about 10 people, or 48%, so about half of the audience are local education agencies.
Okay.
3 people, or 14%, are nonprofit organizations. 4 people, or 19%, are higher education. 3, or 14%, are public or nonprofit local workforce entities, and 1 employer that we have on the webinar today.
Oh, great. That's a wonderful mix. That's a wonderful mix. Thanks, and thanks. That gives us, as we said, that just gives us an idea, and we'll sort of frame our conversation and some of our examples around these different types of organizations that you all represent. So as Sue said, we want to talk about, we've talked a little bit about what sustainability is. Well, there's some myths out there that we just want to dispel at this point, not spend a lot of time on them, but just dispel. As she said, the first one is many people think of sustainability as purely around the money. Well, we got the $4 million, we're set. So no, that is totally a myth, as we've said. Sustainability is much more than that. The second myth often is that sustainability is one person's job. How many times have you heard people say, oh, sustainability, well, you know, we've got a grant writer, they do that. Or isn't that the principal's job or the executive director's job? It's not my job, I don't worry about that. Wrong. Sustainability of an initiative, sustainability of those actions that are meeting the needs of the students are everybody's job. So we want to dispel that myth. Another thing that you often hear about sustainability is that we'll get there. We're on the road to sustainability. It's like we're headed toward this sustainability hotel and we're going to move in and we're going to enjoy ourselves because we are going to be sustainable. Well, we're here to tell you that sustainability is not a destination. It is a process. It's not something that you're going to achieve and be able to check it off. It's a process that we build into our programming so that we can maintain the whole notion of sustainability. And the fourth myth is that there's a silver bullet. If we can just find the right way, we will be sustainable. Those of you on the call, I'm sure, know this from the other work that you've done, but depending on the organization that you come from, depending on the environment in which you work, your sustainability plan is going to look quite different from anybody else's. There really isn't a silver bullet that we can offer you today. We can offer you the pieces of the framework that will help you put together a plan that is specific for your organization, whether you're higher ed or a nonprofit or a public education area or a workforce person. You are all going to come at this slightly differently and you'll have a very different plan. Sue's referred to sustainability can seem big and scary, and our goal today is to try to be as concrete and specific as possible, piece by piece, so that you can see what we think about as sustainability, which is that it's a mindset that leads to strategic action. And this is what's important for all of us to remember, because we bring, each of you on this call, bring the understanding of your project in your specific area within your specific needs. So you bring the mindset of sustainability, and that leads you to the strategic and consistent action that you take along with your team.
So one of the things, building on what Justine was just saying, is, you know, sustainability really is a mindset, and it's something that you need to adopt early in the implementation of any grant or program. And there's specific strategic action that you need to be taking along the way. But one of the things that you really do need to think about, and now that you've all been implementing things for about a year, you're going to have a different sense now, perhaps, than when you first started to implement the grant about what really are the key things that you want to sustain that are working really well, that you see are the critical components of the program, and how do you keep those going after the end of this specific grant. I think lots of times people just automatically go to, well, of course we have to sustain the entire thing exactly as it is right now. And that may be the case. You may be able to find an alternative way to fund the things, the activities that are going on right now. And so in some ways that's plan A. It's the status quo. But in some ways what Youth Career Connect is really helping to leverage at the local level is that in the end, true ultimate success is that in some ways you've changed how you work with some of the other key players in your communities. Maybe these are partners that you haven't worked with as much in the past, but because of how this grant was set up, you've got to work together for it to be ultimately successful. So in a way, what you're doing is kind of a collective impact activity, and true success is when at the end of this, there's just a whole new way of working with all the different partners, and it doesn't have to be as much of an intentional push anymore because it's just the way you do business. So that's kind of the big picture thing, and as I said, plan A is that you can sustain things exactly the way they are now, and maybe you found an alternative source of funding to be able to do that. It may be that you have to do a plan B, and plan B would be you're basically going to try to sustain all the things that are happening right now, but you're going to stitch it together in a little bit more creative way. Maybe you have some new partners that can take on part of the activity that's going on now. Maybe you have new or additional sources of funding. So that would be plan B. And plan C, in some ways you can think of it as worst case scenario, but that sounds kind of dramatic. But the reality is that sometimes some of the things that you were able to do under this grant may not always be able to move forward. So part of what you need to do as you're thinking about sustainability is really think about what are the most important core activities. You'd love to keep everything going, but maybe if resources are short, something's going to have to slide to the back of the list. So you need to be clear which are the absolutely essential things that you need to sustain. And hopefully you can sustain everything, but that isn't always how it works. So just want to lay that out, that there's different ways to think about this. So as I mentioned, and as you all well know, because of how this grant program is set up, you automatically have lots of different partnerships in the communities that are engaged. Some of them are the required ones that were part of what it took to be eligible for one of these grants. And some of them are other folks in the community who are perhaps slightly less, quote, formal partnerships, but still they're part of the stakeholder group that's really paying attention and benefiting from what you're all offering. So one of the things that's a little bit complicated, and just let's put it right out on the table, you've sort of got to be thinking about sustainability in two ways moving forward. You have to think about how are you going to be able to sustain the unique contribution that your organization is bringing to the table as part of the Youth Career Connect grant. But at the same time that you're thinking about how are you going to be able to sustain the specific things that your organization is doing, You also need to be thinking as part of the collective with the other partners about what's the joint plan for how you're going to sustain the entire collective impact initiative. So you kind of have to be thinking on both levels as you move along. So Justine, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. So as Sue has said, this is all of a process of thinking through your project and your program kind of piece by piece. You're sort of taking it apart, not literally, but taking it apart in your own mind and determining what you want to sustain. One of the things that Sue talked about is the relationships and the partnerships and perhaps new ways of doing it. Another way that you might want to think about this is what do you want to sustain in terms of the activities or the actions that you're providing? Is it the integrated academic and career-focused learning? Is it the career counseling, the certifications, the post-secondary credits, the career development, the supportive services? Each of these, I can feel myself as I read these and say them. Each of these is important, and each of these comes together to form the total picture that you're looking at. But one of the things that we're asking you to sort of tease apart is to really look at these and see in a variety of ways how you might look at these. Are there other ways of doing this that maybe somebody else will pick up the certifications or the career counseling, or maybe there's other ways to sustain different parts of these activities, or perhaps somebody is already doing them that just hasn't been brought to the fore yet. So as Sue said, it's not asking you to take apart the program or to in any way dissect what you're doing and not feel the importance of it, but it is important to sort of think about and nosh about, if you will, as you begin to think about a sustainability plan as you're going forward in terms of the A, B, and C scenarios that Sue has pointed out earlier. What are the priority components? That's a really good question that you want to continue with. So regardless of what you decide in terms of your focus for sustainability, an underpinning for all of the pillars is building your case for support. And we want to spend a little time on this because this is when you work with you and your team on building your case for support, know that this is time well spent because you're building a very good foundation for whatever pillar it is that you choose to take on as the first one that you're taking on to work with. So we want to go through these questions and give you our sense of how you might want to approach these. The first question is, what's the specific local need that you address in your program? Be careful here because often people in building their case for support, we've noticed with organizations, have the tendency to be quite generic about it. And what we are suggesting here is that you can be as specific as possible. You all have a great resource in the Department of Labor. You can get statistics in terms of what's happening with the youth in your specific community. You can get statistics on what's happening to employment in your area. And again, be as specific as you can. Don't talk about youth in the United States or youth in your state, but try and get down to the local need. Who are the people in your community? Who are the youth? How many are there in your community? How many employees in your community are not able to find the trained talent locally? And then that leads right into the next one. How are you responding to this need? Be careful here. I know I've done it, and I've heard many people do it. You know, it's so easy to say, well, you know, we got this $4 million grant from the Department of Labor, and we have all these partners, and we're just doing great work. Yeah, right. No. What you want to do here is get, again, brief 2 to 3 sentences of describing what you are doing, what you are doing that meets the needs. What are you doing with the students? You're integrating the academic and the technical. But again, give examples. Your track record. Sue and I are amazed at the metrics that you are gathering in relation to the activities and the service and the support that you are providing. This is the place to use it. Use what's happening. You can always say, this year we have 20 students in our program, and we have more knocking on the door. Next year we know we're going to be up to 40 or 60 if we have the support for them. Or we have this many employers in our program this year, and this many more employers are ready to join us next year. If you only have preliminary data, that's okay. Talk about what your goal is. So again, you're getting the message as specific as possible. The next question that you want to think about is, what's the win-win? And here, we're going to talk more about this when we get down to the outreach section, but you want to be as specific and targeted as possible. Why should somebody want to support you? What are they going to get out of this? Whether it's a parent, or a student, or an employer, or a school district, or a nonprofit organization, or the employment development workforce, what is it that they're going to get out of this program by coming with you in this effort? Another important area, and you all know this around your community, but how does what you're offering align with the other community programs, the other things that are going on that are perhaps addressing the same need or addressing a similar need? You want to be able to talk about that alignment, and you want to be able to talk about the differences as well as the similarities, so that people that you're talking with can say, oh, I see. So you are taking this, you are working with the students in this way, you're offering this, and where the other program is offering this. And then you can see how there's alignment and how there's a collection there, so that other people don't go away saying, well, isn't that what 4-H is doing, or isn't that what the YMCA is doing? And the last one is, what are the barriers to change? We've talked about the need. You also want to talk about, okay, I have run into some difficulties. I know that many of you have talked about, yes, one barrier in terms of getting the really technical expertise or the technical hands-on experience. A barrier for you is students under 18. You have trouble getting them into that technical area. So that is a barrier. You do talk about that, and you talk about what you're doing to address it. Our experience is, Susan, my experience, is that the more specific you can be with your board, with your team, with the people that are working with you in this area, whether it's the collective or whether it's with the people within your organization, the better you can address each of the pillars that we're now going to be able to, begin to talk about. So Sue, I'll let you talk about pillar number 1.
Thanks. Just want to tag on to what Justine was telling you about building your case for support. In some ways, we probably should have called it building your cases, plural, for support.
Yes, right.
Because I think these questions you really need to think through, as Justine has explained, but depending on who you're talking to, you need to tailor it to what their interests are. And we'll be talking a bit more about that, but I just wanted to make sure that we were clear. We don't mean you just need a case for support that works in all situations. You need to have the basics down, but then you need to pull some of these pieces Justine was talking about in, and the tone may be slightly different. If you're talking to a parent or an employer, you may not be saying exactly the same thing. So pillar 1 is resource development. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about this pillar because based on our experience, this is a piece that most folks are pretty familiar with and have some expertise in. Like, after all, you're all part of the YCC grant program. That means you wrote a grant and you got resources. So we're assuming that resource development in the big picture is something that most of you are pretty familiar with. So what we wanted to just highlight here is that there's different types of resources, and not to think too small or too narrow. So dollars, I think, is of course what everybody assumes they're talking about when they're talking about resources, but there's other kinds of resources that could be used in your programs that could also be very useful. So there might be some in-kind donations, might be pro bono services. I know you already do some of that, even if you don't call it that specifically, where you have employers that maybe come in and give presentations to students about certain careers and what kind of training they need to be able to do it. But that's actually a resource that's being given to your program. And there may be other things like that from other organizations in the community that you can tap into. It may be that some of this turns into fee-for-service. We just want you to think more broadly than just grants and dollars. There may be other ways to tap things that you use or you could use that are not just have a dollar sign on them. And we wanted to also point out there's lots of different sources of resources. When you look nationally at where most of the money comes from, when you're not talking about government grants that goes to fund different programs, it's about 3/4 of it comes from individuals that believe in whatever is going on and they step up with their checkbook. So lots of times when it's a program such as this one, you don't think about, well, how could we make this so there's a way that individuals in the community that care about this could actually make a contribution. Local foundations may be concerned about economic development. There's other government grants. There's workplace giving programs, business partnerships we'll talk about in a few minutes under another pillar. Anyway, there's lots of sources. And this pillar sort of overlaps, well, it does overlap with the partnership pillar. It's kind of like two circles that intersect. So that's all I want to say right now about resource development, but we just wanted to make sure that, yes, this is a pillar and you need to think about it, but there's more that you need to think about as well, which is why we're now going to let you hear about Pillar 2.
Thanks, Sue. And Pillar 2 is internal support, and the research development question comes right in here as well, as Sue had said. We emphasize internal support because often people with an initiative or a program forget about the value that this brings and the win-win that this has within the organization that supports the initiative. So as you're thinking about internal support here, you're going to be, again, thinking about it in a couple of ways. One is the organization that houses the grant, and as we've seen by those of you on the call, there's a variety of organizations that house the grant. There's the school districts, there's higher education, there's the workforce investment boards, there's nonprofits. So in one way, you're looking at it from the housing perspective. And from another way, you're looking at internal support through the breadth of the collaborative, the people that you have brought together to really bring this initiative to the community. So the question, so you're keeping those two things in mind, but the questions that you want to think about is, do the people inside your organization really understand this initiative and how it fits within the overall purpose of the organization? Do they understand the value that you bring? Do they understand how you support where they're headed? Do they understand how you fit into the big picture? Then you want to step back and say, how active is the support that we receive from an organization? Sometimes we've noticed that people are receiving support that in some ways they're just taking for granted, and or sometimes they could be receiving support that they haven't asked for. In this area, we want you to think about those different kinds of support. You know, people within your organization might be aware of you. Sometimes that's good enough. If they know that you're the YCC initiative and you're doing important things with kids, great. Sometimes they're advocates. And I think particularly with the key decision makers within your organization, whether you're in a school district and it's the principal or the superintendent, is that key decision maker within that organization an advocate for your program outside or within their own network. Sometimes people within your organization collaborate with you. That may be happening with you around the curriculum. It might be happening with you absolutely in terms of integrating the curriculum with the technical experience. And sometimes people within the organization are providing resources. So we're asking that you really think about this specifically, and then we've got some ideas on the next one in terms of how you might think about these different areas. Do you have, for example, buy-in from the key decision makers? That's just one to reflect on, and you probably all know immediately whether you do or not. Are you getting operational support? And you might think about what kind of operational support are you getting from your organization and what kind might be useful. We just thought, you know, you might be getting transportation for the students to and from their technical. You might be getting some support in terms of developing MOUs. Are you getting financial support, like our salaries paid, our different financial offerings made within the organization? Are you getting support from the management systems, for example? Is it the organization system that oversees your fiscal? And is it the organization system that oversees your HR, your hiring, and your all of the promotion and the information that goes on with whoever is working on your grant? These are all kinds of internal support that you may or may not now be receiving, that you want to for sure recognize in one way or another. And then the most important thing is that you keep the people that are providing that kind of support, or the offices that are providing that kind of support, informed. And as you keep them informed, we want you to be thinking about these next kinds of questions. And that is, what is it that you bring? Even if it's the person that's providing your fiscal oversight, have them understand the program that they're supporting. What is it that you bring to this organization? What's the unique contribution? You know, you might bring new partners. You might bring new programs, new services, new clients, a broader reach. The more people within your organization understand this, the more they can support you in many different ways. Who currently sees the value of what it takes to be a part of this? Who in the organization sees the value of what you do? Is it the board leadership? Perhaps it's the school board that sees the value. Perhaps it's your organization's board that sees the value of what you do. Perhaps it's the programmatic folks. Perhaps in the school district, it's the other counselors that see the value of what you do. Perhaps in your community, it's the employers that see the value. Perhaps it's the operational folks that see the value. Who else needs to be actively on board? When you look at your organization, are there pockets missing? Are there people that would be wonderful, or are systems that would be great to have involved that currently aren't supporting you, but would be so helpful if they would? And again, it may not be money. It might be collaboration. It might be services. It might simply be a champion. and what kind of support, again, as I said, it's either in kind or cash or services, it's championships, it's awareness. The more your internal organization understands the value that you bring and what they get out of, what's the win for them out of the program that you have, the more support you will have towards becoming sustainable, whatever it is that you are trying to sustain. You want to be real clear on that pillar in terms of developing a plan. What do we bring? What do we need? Who needs to be on board? And how can we get them on board? What do we need to tell them about that? And then we get to move to partnerships, Sue.
Thanks. So I just want to tack a couple things on to what Justine was saying. You know, I think lots of times our experience is that people give support and they think it's a great thing when you come to the table because you got a big grant. And then they think you're the best thing since sliced bread. But then when they have to really step up and be more actively engaged to help you problem solve and figure out how you may be able to replace resources that were coming from the grant, then sometimes if you haven't been proactive with helping them really see the benefit that Justine was talking about, then maybe they're less engaged than you need them to be. So part of the internal support piece is don't assume everybody loves what you're doing as much as you do, because you see the day-to-day impact it's having. Sometimes, you know, you assume that everybody else must get it, and maybe they don't. So to be really strategic and proactive about how you engage with key decision makers or players within your organization really is something to think about, because the more you can be transparent and keep sharing what's happening, maybe ask for their input on some challenges, that's going to raise their buy-in, and then they'll really feel like it's as important as you do. And I mean, what you want them to do is roll up their sleeves and help you figure out how to make sure this thing continues. So that's just what I wanted to add on that one. So pillar 3 is partnerships, and a piece of this is related to resources, which is why I said that these two pillars overlap each other. But one of the things to think about, you already have lots of different partners, and we talked about that a bit ago, and you know it because you live it every day. But there may be other organizations in the community that could be partners, but in that way, partnership may look different. All partnerships are not exactly the same. Sometimes it is the folks that roll up their sleeves and really help do the work. And so those really are collaborative partnerships. There's other people that maybe are not actually helping you do something, but they get what you're up to and they can help spread the word and go to bat for you or help open doors. They're really the advocates that support what you're up to. And then the third bucket of partnerships is really the folks that have resources, the organizations that have resources that they're willing to contribute to what they're doing, what you're doing, because they see the value of it. So as you're thinking about different partnerships that you have, part of what you need to think about is what kind of relationships do we have with them now? So sometimes it might be that an organization that's largely been an advocate, maybe there's a way to deepen that relationship and have them more actively engaged as a collaborator, or maybe you can take their advocacy and either have them open up their pocketbook and budget, or they can open some doors for you to access other organizations that might be able to support you with some kind of resource. As we just mentioned, you have lots of different kinds of partnerships that you're already working on, but I think part of what we want you to think about here is beyond the immediate folks that you've been working with very intensively, who else is in your community that you can make a link to? And it's maybe a different kind of partnership than you have with the core organizations that are part of YCC, but there are other organizations in the community that will be really interested in what you're doing, because you're basically bringing along the next generation of folks that are going to be in the workforce, and you're really trying to make sure that they're equipped for the kinds of positions that the economy at this time has a need for. And there's a lot of businesses, for example, that think a lot about that because they care about the community, they're based there, but that's where their customers live and that's where their employees come from. So to think who's in that next concentric circle out or 2 circles out, who else in the community might be a good partner for what you're up to. And to think beyond just the usual suspects. Some of the usual suspects are already involved with you, but who else can you figure out a way in to show that there's a unique contribution that they could make that helps you either become more visible or access more resources. So some of the things to think about as you're thinking about expanding beyond some of the partners that you have right now, and I guess I should say sometimes the organizations that were part of the required partner pool that you needed for this grant, maybe some of those relationships in the end are not yet as strong as you'd like them to be. So some of this is also for that sort of first tier of partners. How do you strengthen the relationship and get some of those organizations to be more actively engaged at the level that I think you may have been hoping would happen? But then for the next layer out, it's really similar to what Justine was talking about around making your case for support. When you're trying to open the doors with a new partner, the more specific you can be about what it is you're doing and how they can help you, it makes a really big difference. I think if you ask in a generic way, people are busy, organizations, you know, there's very few people that say, hey, we're flush, we've got lots of resources. But if you break it down into doable chunks and offer sort of a portfolio of options, then if they like what you're doing, they can see a way that they can maybe take on a chunk. And they start building a relationship with what you're doing, and they can maybe experience some of it firsthand. And maybe subsequently, they're willing to offer up more resources, or they'll be more intensively engaged. And you really need to think about, as Justine was saying, what's the win for them? Not just you get to feel good because you helped us, but how is it going to actually make a difference for their organization? If you're thinking about businesses beyond the employers that you've targeted, you're going to want to talk about how you're training the next generation of the workforce, and you're strengthening the infrastructure within the community, making sure that businesses that make certain kinds of things or services stay located in the community and are not moving elsewhere because they think there'll be more employable folks. So you have to think about what would they think is a benefit to them and make sure you leverage that. And a piece of it is thinking about how do you start engaging with them right now. This is not something to wait until, we've got a year left, we've got 6 months left. We need to start thinking about sustainability. Sometimes these relationships have to grow over time. In some ways, it's sort of like dating. You know, you don't jump into the deep end of the pool with a new partner and say, hey, yeah, let's get married. No, there's sometimes the getting to know you phase, and as they get to know you, they become more bought into what you're doing. So sometimes, like building a lot of partnerships takes time. So you have to make sure you build that in as you're thinking about your plan. So I just want to mention a few bars about thinking about other businesses in the community beyond just the employers that you're focused on right now. Other businesses, as I mentioned, do care about what's going on in the community, and they want to support their community. And a lot of them really do want to invest their skills and resources to help make real change. And they live there too, and they want to make sure that it's a good economic environment and that their employees live in a place where they can have good quality of life. So there's a lot of business benefits for companies that get involved in community activities. A big piece is they get known as the good guys in the community. It enhances their reputation and their brands. There's a big piece that is about, okay, if people know we're here and they have a positive view of us, they're going to buy stuff from us, products or services. I mean, at the end of the day, even if they don't talk about that, of course, there's the we want to do it because it's the right thing to do piece, but at the end of the day, they're actually hoping that it's going to have a bottom line impact on their business. And then the third big chunk of business benefit relate to their employees. As you know, because of why this grant program was set up, there's real competition for scarce people to fill certain kinds of jobs. So lots of companies are looking for what's the added value that we can leverage when we're trying to recruit and keep our employees that we have. And so sometimes that is they want the folks that they're recruiting to know, look what we're doing in the community, we're very actively involved, and it makes a difference. People want to work for companies that are the good guys. That means something to them, and especially with millennials coming up, there's been a lot of research done that shows that their expectations of what companies they're going to work for, a piece of it is all about how can I be in my job and do good. So if the company is doing something that's supporting what you're up to, that's going to be more attractive to them. Justine, I'm going to pass it back to you for Pillar 4.
Okay, great. And just to kind of bring a bow to the last one, I just want to reiterate what Sue said, and that is that as you look at partnerships, you're looking at the current ones that you have as well as creating new ones, because all of these questions and comments that Sue gave relate to the current partnerships as well. And I know many of you that you're just in your second year probably have partnerships that are currently perhaps advocates, but you would love them to be collaborators and or bring resources. You want to move them on that continuum. So use all of this as you look at those partnerships, as well as Sue said, it's always time to reach out as well. And that does get us into this next section, which is outreach. And this is where, when we were talking about building your case for support, this is where we get really specific about who it is that you're reaching out to. But let's talk a little bit in general first about some of the general things that you need to think about. And you want to ask yourself, are you actively sharing yourself? Are you actively sharing what you're doing and why you're doing it? I know we're going to get back. There we go. And if you're not, it's a missed opportunity. And as we said when we were talking about the internal support, think outreach internally as well as within your own partners, as well as outside. So here's where you get really specific about the community problem you are providing a solution to. Who, how many are affected? What are the consequences? You always say, why should I care? You always give somebody a reason for caring. What do you do? And here again, the sexy summary. not the long, involved discussion of this grant, but the sexy summary of what you're doing that will grab somebody and have them understand. Where are you going? What's the outcome data that you have? What are your goals? Why do you think? What's the evidence that you have that says that you're going to be there? And then always, what's in it for me? Answer that question for folks. Don't leave them hanging, wondering if there's something in it for them, regardless of your audience, whether it's a millennial, whether it's a student, whether it's a parent, an employer, a new business partner, whatever it is, think about it from their perspective so that you can answer that question for them, and that opens up the conversation. There's this one. We have a bias, and that is...
yes, Susan and Justine, I just wanted to touch... Hi, it's Maisha. I just wanted to see if there were any questions coming in. This is a lot of great information. I just wanted to touch base with the grantee, see if any questions were coming in. I know we're almost done with the presentation, but if you guys have any burning questions, you can put them in the Q&A area, or let us know by raising your hand. There's a little raising hand button here. I know we can't unmute the lines, I don't think, Angela, but I just wanted to touch base and let you know that, you know, Justine and Susan are rolling. But if you have questions, you can put them in there, and we're going to come and get them from you. So just keep going, Justine and Susan. I didn't know where to interrupt, so
that's great. No, thanks.
Kind of interrupt, put my 2 cents in there. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll continue with our role. Anyway, our bias is you always ask for action. So let's go on to the next one too, which is the audience. We've talked about different audiences in a variety of ways, and again, you all know your audience. We've referred to this, and the point here is to tailor your message to the specific interests of the audience. Students want to know what's in it for them. Parents want to know, how will this benefit my student? How will it benefit my students' peers? How will it benefit the school community? You all know this and you deal with it. I would like to say we've got some tips for outreach, but just as we get to those, we'd just like to say that this is a great place for you to look internally for resources. I know you don't have, within your grants, it looks to me like you don't have a lot of staff on your grants. So this is a great place to look internally for not only the data, but also what has been successful with the different audiences. So let's just look quickly at the tips for outreach. Yeah, again, we've said this a variety of ways. Promote action, talk about the win-win, create a consistent brand image. I'm not sure how possible that is for some of you within your organizations, whether you can have a brand image for an initiative or not. But if you can, it's important to have a brand image. We're going to show you some examples in a minute that will show that. And then a mix of channels for the outreach. And the multiple channels that we have today, as you look at this list, you'll want to look and see, okay, which one of these are we using? Do we have any metrics that show the success or who's really tapping into these different channels of outreach? Do we have metrics about the print materials, or do we have metrics on the website, social media? Again, the channel that you choose to use or emphasize may well depend upon the audience that you're trying to reach. And here again is where I would say look internally for some of the expertise that is clearly there within your organization, because I'm sure they've tried a variety of ways of this, and I'm sure you as peers also have tried a variety of the channels and have some expertise for one another around this. Mass media, public relations, everybody's working on an elevator speech. So we have just 3 examples that we want to give you, and we've chosen written ones because we can see them here. This first example is just a leave behind. This is an informational handout that the only goal of this is to raise awareness. There, you can see that it talks about how it's saving taxpayer dollars, what the equipment is, it's vested in the community, who we are. These examples are all coming from a volunteer fire department. Again, it's an informational handout to raise awareness, no particular call to action. I don't know what your experience is with these, but our experience has been that often people say, oh, wow, that's interesting, and leave it behind and it doesn't come up again. This one is a partnership flyer, and the purpose of this is to recruit community partners. So here it begins to be very specific in terms of here's what you'll get for this, here's what we expect from you, here are some examples, some stories from other partners, and here's what you need to do to join us. And then the last example is a flyer that goes for membership, looking for junior volunteers. So this one is geared toward a younger clientele, or a younger audience, not clientele, a younger audience. Again, it's like, what's in it for me? It's spelled out right there. What do you get out of this? What do you have to give? And here are some stories from some of your peers about how it's been for them. And here's what you need to do. You'll notice, in general, that there's branding. So when you pick it up, you know that this is the volunteer firefighters. The language and presentation are quite different, but an example is included. So that's a brief overview to the outreach, which I know many of you are involved in, and there will be more discussion about this as we proceed along. So thanks, Sue. I'll let you go back to the pillars.
Okay. Well, we've now given you kind of a smear of information across the framework that we use, which includes these 4 pillars. So hopefully you've gotten some new ideas from that. But before we move on to just wrapping it up and then moving into questions, which we'll get to really shortly, if you were able to download already the worksheets that we pulled together that are kind of homework that are going to follow up after this webinar and will be some of the pre-work before small group calls that we'll talk about in a minute. You should see a worksheet that looks basically like this. It's not in color, and it has each of the 4 pillars in one of the quadrants. And what we want you to do for just a second, based on what you've heard us talking about what you need to be thinking about in any one of these pillars, we want you to sort of do a quick mini self-assessment for yourself. If you see that the very center of the circle where the lines cross, if you think of that as 0, meaning we haven't done this yet, and the outer part of the circle, if you think of that as 100%, yeah, we're on it, and we've got this one dialed in. For each of the 4, I want you to just really quickly think about, for your organization, how are you doing already in this pillar? Because some of you have been doing significant work already, even if you haven't always labeled it as sustainability in each of these 4 quadrants. I just want you to, we're going to give you a second, or 30 seconds, to just kind of put a dot where you think you are between 0 and 100% for each of these 4. And then we're going to do a quick poll to see which one you felt like is where you want to put your focus to develop it further. Like, what will be the first one where you think you can have the most impact? So I'll give you a second to rate yourselves, and then Angela will put up the poll.
So again, everybody, please go to the polling area of the section down there to fill out your strength. We only have one option, so what is the strongest strength that you have? Some of you guys are rocking it all, so what is your strongest area? And if you have any questions, again, please let us know. So thank you.
Well, while you're wrapping that up, part of what we want to reiterate for you is that to be sustainable in the long haul, you're really going to need to think about all 4 of these pillars. But it is kind of overwhelming to think about going full bore on all of them all at once. So we really do want you to think about what's the area that if you put your immediate focus on, where can you get the most bang for your buck in terms of your time and any resources it takes to really expand what you've been doing in that. So we'll let you go ahead and put your answers in the poll. And while you're, oops, she just ended it, which is great. Thank you for all of you that gave some feedback there. Angela, can you tell us, oh, there it is. Everybody can see the results. So it looks like continuing to develop partnerships was the most frequently said of where people think they would get the most bang for their buck moving forward. Outreach was number 2, followed by internal support and then resource development. So that just gives you some sense of how your peers are thinking, and that helps us as we think about some of the follow-up we're going to be doing to this webinar. So before we open it up for questions and answers, just want to quickly reiterate some of the key takeaways we hope you have gotten from what we've shared with you today. So one is that sustainability really is a mindset and strategic action over time. It's not a destination. It's not a one-time thing. It's something that you really need to build in and weave through everything you're doing on an ongoing basis. You need to think on 2 levels. You both need to think about the sustainability of your piece of the pie and how do you sustain what it is the collective or the partnership has been doing together. You need to tailor your sustainability plan to your specific context. There's no silver bullet, and you really need to think about how you prioritize what you want to sustain and where the strengths are currently, but where the gaps are, which may be someplace you need to focus more intensively. Another key takeaway is you really do need to start now, and we always recommend that you start with the pillar where you feel like you can get the most traction out of the gate as a great place to start. You need to be proactive, keep key players inside your organization and out in the community informed. You need to think out of the box because that can open some new doors for partnerships and resources. Think beyond just the employers that are currently actively engaged in what you're doing, because there are other companies in your community that have resources and care about what you're doing, and there may be a way to involve them, although their involvement may look different. And then the last key takeaway we just wanted to reiterate was what Justine was just talking about. You really need to tailor your outreach using different channels and think about who are you really gearing this to and what's the core message and what do you want them to do. So coming up with one flyer is not going to work for everybody. You really do need to have separate approaches for different groups that you're trying to reach. So Justine, why don't I turn it back to you to talk about next steps and homework?
So we do have some homework and some worksheets for you. So our first suggestion is based on how you have assessed how you're doing in each pillar, prioritize 1 or 2 pillars that you want to focus on immediately as we continue to reiterate where you're going to get the greatest bang for your buck right out of the gate. Ultimately, absolutely, you'll look at all 4, but pick 1 or 2 right now. Then complete the corresponding worksheet for that pillar in your packet. We do suggest that you include others in this dialogue, again, going back to sustainability is everybody's job. And if you have time, go ahead and look at the others as well. And then we'll be setting up some smaller group calls. Based on all of this, we'll be in consultation with the DOL staff to take a deeper dive into some of these areas, and we'll keep you posted on that. Our DOL will keep you posted on that. For you, think about, as you're just sitting here, before you head back into the frenzy of your office, what was your biggest aha from today's webinar? What were your key learnings? And what's something new that you want to do right now? So just take a couple of minutes to reflect on those as we continue. And again, if you have questions, we have run a little bit over, so if you have questions, be sure and put them in the chat box. Here are some additional resources for you that you can refer to, that you can utilize as you're getting into all of that. And as we go on into the smaller group conversations, we'll be able to give you more resources that are targeted as well. Right, and I think we now are to the questions. Please enter your questions, and Angela.
And I think what we would like folks to do is to do their homework assignment, right? I want them to think about those questions, and we did, again, I think Angela may have shared this with you all earlier, we have a packet of information in Microsoft Word you can all work on our community of practice that you could pull up with your team and go through a series. I think it's about 4 exercises, right, ladies?
Yes.
It's
5.
It's five exercises that you guys can all go through in regards to preparing for your sustainability. You all know that we are attempting to get approval for our conference this year here in DC. Of course, we have no more details besides that, but one thing we will be working on is hopefully will be sustainability, and we hope that that homework will help you prepare for that conversation more in depth. So we definitely want you guys to do those homework assignments, and I think, Angela, if you want to share with the group what Susan and Justine are going to be doing with them over the next couple of months, that'd be great as well.
Yes, absolutely. This is Angela, everyone. So what we're going to be doing, I know this is a lot of information to take in right now, and some of you have already been thinking about sustainability. Some of you maybe haven't. You know, I know from reading the narrative reports, you know, we're at different levels of how far we've gotten with sustainability, and that's okay. We're not, you know, we're not judging anyone here. This is just an opportunity to really do some great work on this and, you know, get ahead of the ball. We're halfway through these grants. So what we're going to be doing is setting up some group conference calls with all of you that Sue and Justine are going to be on, and we're going to kind of go over that homework a little more individually. So maybe 4 or 5 grantees on a call, and we're going to try to group you together by kind of the type of program or the type of community that you're in. So grantees that are in, you know, a larger city will be grouped together, and then grantees that are maybe in a more rural area because will be grouped together because we feel like those challenges might be similar for those grantees dealing with the community around them. So we really hope, I put the link to the handout in the chat box that you'll go through and look at those. It was also sent out in an email today, that you'll download that. Just take some time to reflect on it. Actually, you know, fill in the documents. You know, feel free to type. Those are, you know, yours to keep and yours to say. We're not going to, you know, those aren't going to be turned into DOL as your sustainability plan by any means. It's really something for you to kind of think through what's going on in your program. And then we're going to set up these small group calls with Sue and Justine, and we'll be sending out those schedules to hopefully get all of you on those calls, or as many as possible, to talk about those the worksheets and where you're at in your program, and have them answer any questions. You know, they're the subject matter experts in this, and, you know, they have a lot of insight. They've been doing this for a while and have been working with other programs, so they have a lot of experience and maybe can help you in an area where you're stuck, or you just don't have, you haven't done much in a certain area, which we expect that, you know, like they said, you're going to choose a couple, 1 or 2 to start with, and then, you know, move on until you can have all 4. So that's what we'll be doing. So you'll be hearing more from us. We do have a question that came in that sustainability is, yes, definitely everyone's job. However, this person thinks that usually it's the primary responsibility of usually a fraction or small people, if not 1 or 2 people. Do you have any examples, and for Sue and Justine, of where sustainability is a full-time or at least a half-time job? Maybe in other programs or other programs that you've worked with.
Justine, I'll take a crack and then you can jump in. I think in terms of what I've seen organizations do that seems like it's effective, there really isn't any one person that is tasked as sort of like the sustainability director. I think the organizations that have been successful, like they have some meetings and they get everybody on board with, okay, we're going to be working in these 4 pillars, and different people are out in the community from your organization in a variety of contexts. So it seems like some of the groups that are successful also think about what are some of the key talking points, so that if one person is talking to, let's say, an employer, they're giving the same message as somebody else. So there may be some pulling together of some talking points to share with different staff members, so that would be useful. I think the drawback when it's only one person that's kind of responsible for it is other people can go off on a tangent and they don't really know what everybody else is doing. But I think having it become really part of the mindset, and maybe there's somebody that's a point of contact that helps coordinate if people have referrals to make back, like I talked to this company and I think they're going to be willing to step up with this kind of a resource, can you follow up? I think in that way, having a point person can be helpful, but I haven't really seen where organizations have had like a full-time sustainability specific person. Justine, have you seen that?
I haven't, nor even a half-time person. I think the organizations that I've seen, it's more been looked at as the responsibility of the executive director or the head, if you will, the project manager. But the organizations that I have seen be very successful with it have had like, the mindset is that everybody's responsible, and then there's sort of like the executive leadership or the leadership group has this as part of their plan, and then everybody sort of talks about it, and they determine the strategic actions that are going to be taken. And as Sue said, then you need the undergirding of the administrative support, the contact, like somehow you're keeping track of who's doing what and how that's going, so that you begin to work with this just like you do with any of the other aspects of your project. Does that make sense to people? I know you can't. Sorry. I know you're all muted.
It makes sense
to
me.
Yeah, it makes sense to Sue and I. Good.
Well, and if that's a burning topic, make sure you keep that as something to talk about in whatever small group you're going to end up being part of, and we can dig deeper on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because depending on your context, that might look a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Angela, are there other questions that have come through?
We do not have any other questions, although please
Yes.
typing. And Maisha, I don't know if you had any questions you wanted to ask.
I was just going to say, you know, how often should sustainability groups meet? I mean, we have a little ways to go to the end of the grant period. Should they be meeting once a month? What do you suggest? Once a quarter, or as frequently as often as, you know? So what do you all think?
One of the things that I've seen folks do is have, especially in the early stages, thinking about what's the plan and figuring out who's going to be doing which pieces. Maybe there's the need for some separate meetings to get that work done. But then I think as much as this can be integrated into meetings that happen for other reasons, and it's one point to cover, I think that helps keep it top of mind and keeps everybody informed about what's been going on. And if somebody has a lead on something, they can pass that along to whoever might be the appropriate person to do some follow-up. So I think having set sustainability meetings, like after the first few, like I'm not sure how frequently would be recommended on that, because I've seen it more kind of woven in. Justine, do you have a different sense of that?
No, I think, no, that would be my sense too, that it's woven in, and if the project team gets together, if the collaborative gets together for other project or initiative business, then sustainability is just part of the discussion, just like everything else. And so if you determine that one of your first pillars you're going to work on is partnership, then that comes up in terms of maybe, as Sue said, maybe there's a smaller group that gets together with a plan and presents that in terms of the assessment and the plan, but brings that to the total group, and then it becomes part of the ongoing discussion.
Okay. Anybody else? Andrew, you have any questions?
I would just like to ask, and maybe, you know, and Justine can touch on a little bit, being that these grants are all, if not specifically kind of awarded to the actual school, the high school, you know, it's a part of the grant program, and we know that school boards, you know, depending on the community, can be easy to work with or can be difficult to work with.
Right.
You know, and I'm not sure that anyone actually on the grants is really a part of the school board, and they have such a big say over funding and what gets funded and what's not. If you have any advice on working with school boards or working with schools in general, and especially if you're not maybe inside the school itself.
Well, schools can be difficult, and school boards can be really difficult. So I totally get that one. From the education programs that I've done a lot of work with, and a big piece of my background comes out of performance measurement and evaluation, so of course I bring that bias to everything I do. I think especially schools and districts there's a lot of programs that want into the schools, so sometimes there's a level of competition that school-specific administration and district staff and school boards, as they're weighing through it, it's like, well, they may all look good on paper, how to choose between the options about what they actually really want to support. So I think the more that you can rely on some of the data that you're collecting and really package that in some nice ways, and maybe balance that with some great stories of the impact on employers and students, and maybe have some visuals in it. I think really promoting how many people you're serving, like really leverage that data, because I think it gets attention, because schools also are very assessment-driven and data-driven. They're worried about, you know, our kids, how are they doing on this and that test? So the more you can leverage the data that shows that this program's really making a difference, I think that helps. Justine, what kind of ideas do you have?
And I would say that particularly around the school boards, this is where you really need to pull in all of your advocates and all of the people, like, and within the school, you want within the school, you want my bias, you want the school secretary and you want the principal understanding what it is that you're doing, and you nurture that relationship and those relationships to get them to be advocates for you that go through their channels to the superintendent. But also, you look, and this is where you're so lucky to have the collaborative actually, because you look at the relationships and the networks of each of the people on your collaborative, and I know many of you have advisory boards, and you really strategize. Who is it that we know on the school board? What is the message that they are going to listen to? And how can we get that message to them? we've worked with several groups who haven't worked with school boards but have worked with state legislatures looking for money. And they're very, very specific about really teasing out who knows whom, who's going to hear this story in what way, and who do we need to talk to and or have them talk to that. And then, of course, you know, you get your advocates, you get your champions, and when it comes up for a vote, you're all there. Yeah, and it's not easy. I know it's not easy. I've worked within my own daughters growing up in terms of trying to get school boards to change their minds, and I do recognize that it's not easy, but it takes a plan and consistency.
Well, thank you. I was going to say there's no more questions. I don't think there's any more questions. I think people are really, they took in a lot of information. It was great. And again, we have copies of these slides on our community of practice. If you want to kind of read over the slides one more time and get more, you know, feel a little bit more in depth about it in the homework assignments. We look forward to working with Justine and Susan over the next upcoming months to get some more kind of more attention to our sustainability plan, and I think Angela and I will be in touch with you all about when those calls are going to be taking place and what you guys need to have completed or done before those calls so that we can move forward to have a fruitful discussion. So I think that's it, Angela. Are we done? Thanking you, Justine, and of course, and Susan for your time and your expertise. We definitely want to say thank you, and we look so forward to working with you. I don't know if Angela has any other, updated, next, thank you. Do I have the ball? Okay, next trainings. We have a great training coming from our apprenticeship office that's going to talk about apprenticeship and in-school youth, which is your population, March 23rd at 3 p.m. We're very excited. Apprenticeship is really kind of revitalizing their efforts here at the Department of Labor and around the nation after celebrating 75 years of apprenticeship. So we look forward to hearing about their opportunities and opportunities for our young people who are currently in school to get engaged in pre-apprenticeship programs and apprenticeship programs. And then we have a great social media planning webinar that's going to be coming up talking about your sites and your Facebook and your Twitter accounts and how we can best meet the needs of our customers, whether it be the parent, business, or our young people, our students in the school. So, and we, Angela and I may have another one coming up too. We had a meeting earlier today. So just keep your eyes open to upcoming trainings you can join us on in the not too distant future. And I think we are done, Angela. Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And there should be a survey that you guys should be taking as soon as you close out. A survey should pop up and ask you guys how did we do. So when you do leave our meeting, please make sure you take that survey so we can know what you want to talk about, what you want to hear about, and how we did today. Thanks again.